underneath the sand car. The journey's profound to the heart of the monster.
History, Kamiah history. Cuts each sheep, made it so early. Aliens, cuts each sheep. Kamiah history, Kamiah history.
Today is February the 18th, 2014, and the location of the interview is the Veterans Center in Walla Walla, Washington. I am interviewing Larry Adams, a Vietnam veteran, and Larry was born April the 20th, 1940. Dixie Ferguson and Vic Phillips, the videotaper, are conducting the interview. We represent the Blue Mountain chapter of the American Red Cross. So, Larry, what war and branch of service did you serve?
I served in the Vietnam era war, and I flew. I served in the United States Marine Corps.
Mm-hmm. And your rank going in and coming out?
Going in, I went in as an aviation cadet, and I went through flight school as an enlisted Marine. And my dog tags has got my old enlisted dog tags. And when I finished all of the requirements and all the flight training, I got my wings and my commission on the same day in November the 8th of 1963.
63. All right. And we're going to get into the areas, places that you serve. So we'll ask that question as we go along. Okay. And you enlisted?
Yes.
Yes. Uh-huh. And where were you living at the time of your enlistment?
I was living in Milwaukee, Oregon. I was teaching the 4th grade at West Concord Elementary School.
And why did you decide to do this?
Well, it was kind of an economic thing. I was making $3,500 a year teaching. And I just had a provisional certificate because I got that through Lewis and Clark Teachers College in Lewiston. And I knew I needed to get more school to get to where I could teach to junior high or wherever I wanted to go. But the only way I figured on doing it was to go join one of the services and come out and use a GI Bill to go back to school to further my education.
And why the Marines?
I went through all of the services. The last one I hit was the Marine Corps recruiting station. And this guy, a gunnery sergeant, with his undress blues on, he had the tan shirt and the red stripe down his blue trousers, and I came through the door, and he got up, and he came over to me, shook my hand, and he said, "What can we do for you?" And I told him I'm just scouting around looking for opportunities in the military service. And he invited me over, and he sat on the same side of the desk I was. He didn't sit across the desk. He sat right there. First thing he said after we sat down is he said, "Son, tell me about yourself." None of the others did that.
Real professional.
So he asked me if I would, after we got through some of the interview with him, he asked me if I'd ever had an idea that I wanted to fly. And I said, no, I never had. I said, we had a little grass strip in our little town in Kamiah, Idaho, but we'd go down and watch them, but that was it. And he said, well, if you'd think about it. And so I said, well, yeah, I'd like to give it a shot. So he said, okay, there's a whole series of tests you've got to take. No commitment at all. I'll tell you when you have to make a decision. And I went through all of the battery of aptitude tests and all that other stuff. And my last one was a flight physical at Sandpoint Naval Air Station out of Seattle. And when I got back from that, the next Monday, he called me and he said, "Larry, you now have a decision to make." That was in April. And I got a school date to Pensacola in October of that year.
It was is moving along pretty quickly.
It does, yeah.
And you're in Pensacola.
Yeah.
And again, what year did you get to Pensacola?
I got there in November or October, I believe. Yeah, in October of 1963.
63. All right. At that time, were there any rumblings about Vietnam?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So you knew there could be this possibility?
Mm-hmm.
Out there in the
Pretty sure. And I'm sorry, I got my wings in 1963. It was 1962 when I was down there. But anyway, they said the Marine Corps are beefing up their helicopter pilot pool, and there were 50 in my pre-flight class, and out of the 50, there were 45 Navy cadets, and there were 5 Marine cadets, and all 5 of us went to the helicopter pipeline after we finished our basic training.
Mm-hmm. Boy, what a small select camaraderie, huh?
Yeah.
5 Marines. Did the Navy give you a bad time?
Not really. Well, we had somebody that kind of balanced things out. We went to academics a half a day, and the rest of it was boot camp. And we had a Marine gunnery sergeant by the name of Gunnery Sergeant Ban Savage, and he looked out after his Marines pretty good, but he was also in charge of all of the Navy guys.
Right.
But he drove us hard, too.
You never forget those names, do you?
No, you don't. No, you don't.
They're like family the rest of your life.
Absolutely.
And all of that was taking place in Pensacola, then, the combination of training?
Yes, it was Pensacola and some outlying fields. There were about 3 different, depending on which aircraft we were flying at that time, whatever stage of the training we were in. We might have been in Milton Freewater, at Whiting Field, we might have been to Softly Field, just outside of the Pensacola. It was all within 30 minutes of the main base.
Were you liking it?
I was busy. I found I was pretty much an athlete in high school and part of college, but never did get too serious about the academics. But when I got there, I tell you what, they had some unbelievable instructors, and I always had trouble with certain elements of math. But these guys, they gave you something like you do a formula. In high school, they just said, okay, just solve that formula. But these guys would give you what you were going to use after you got that thing solved. And you became more, are you going to do a formula for thrust or for acceleration or this or that in physics and those things? And they were so good, and they just spent so much time. I spent a week of, we called it stupid study while I was there for math, but gosh, they were just excellent instructors.
Really?
Yeah.
Really pulled you along and got the job done.
Yeah.
For sure. About how long altogether was the whole training then before you got your wings?
The traditional amount before they started gearing up for Vietnam was 18 months. But we had big pools of people at different stages of training, and we might wait 2 or 3 weeks before we could get into the pipeline to start our training on that particular aircraft. And it took me about 22 months to get through there, because they were just pushing so many people through there at that time. Navy guys as well.
Yeah, close to 2 years then. Mm-hmm. What'd your family think about you doing all this? Quite a switch from teaching.
Yeah, it was. It was pretty good. My mom was a little hesitant. My dad was real proud of me, and so we got along fine. And I got more letters from them. It was just amazing.
Did they get letters from you?
Oh yes, they did. They did.
Very good. Well then. You're done, got your wings, and a bona fide helicopter pilot, and what plans did they have for you next?
Well, their long-range plan was to shave my head and send me to Vietnam, but instead my orders were to Santa Ana, California, with Mag 36, the air group.
Mag will deployed?
Marine Aircraft Group 36, and it was a helicopter group at Santa Ana, and it was in those old blimp hangars that they had down there at Santa Ana. And we had 4 squadrons of Marine squadrons of helicopters in those hangars. They were so huge. But I got my initial training there, and I got certified as an aircraft commander there in HMM Marine Helicopters Medium Squadron 361. Got my aircraft commander certification there, where I could fly as actually as the aircraft commander instead of just a co-pilot. So there was a lot of training that had to be done then.
May I ask how you qualified to get in the command position? You were just doing well and you put in for it?
We had a syllabus, and there were tests all along about, I don't know. First, one of them was you had to have a certain, you had to have at least 500 hours. You had to have gotten your instrument card, you had to fly formation, and you had to have so many hours through the syllabus, and their testing as long as they all the way through there. And once you got that, then you were certified as you could sign for your own airplane, and then you'd get a quick co-pilot and go. But we often, even when I was flying, when I got out of the Marine Corps, you would often fly for a co-pilot for somebody, and the next day they'll fly as a co-pilot for you. So it worked around.
Yeah.
So,
but you were qualified.
Yeah,
And you got your own helicopter at that point.
well, yeah, we had one assigned to us on every mission that we had, and we would know that morning which one it was going to be, and one of us would go down and pre-flight it, and then we'd go back to get our mission brief, and then we'd go down and sign for the airplane.
Well, you got to see beautiful Southern California, but that wasn't the end of it.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't.
And at that point, now you're fully trained, and this is time for Vietnam then.
And we were lucky because we were deployed to Vietnam in May of 1965. They put our aircraft, the squadron, on the USS Lexington. No, it was the USS Valley Forge. I'm sorry. We flew them on, and we left in May of '65.
Would that have been in San Diego, where you boarded?
Yes, it was in San Diego. No, I'm sorry, it was Long Beach. It was at Long Beach, yeah. Yeah. But we had been training as a squadron for about a year and a half, which was really good because you knew everybody. You knew your CO, you knew the XO, you knew the capabilities of all of the other pilots, and we felt very comfortable in going.
Absolutely. Now, being a helicopter pilot and getting orders for Vietnam, to me, you kind of had a hunch of what was ahead of you, and this was at the beginning of the Vietnam War, and serious stuff, you know?
Yeah, very serious trip.
Flying a helicopter over there, very sobering. So you were on board the Valley Forge, and you floated over then and went to Da Nang?
We floated over. No, we offloaded in Okinawa. And we stayed there for about 2 weeks, and we offloaded our helicopters. And they were beautiful because we knew that they needed to be all in shape and everything new and all this other stuff. The Marine Corps made us leave our helicopters there when we left on C-130s to go to Da Nang. And we took over a squadron down there. We got there that day. We unloaded off of the C-130s, and the guys that we were replacing got right back on the other ones and went to Okinawa, and then they went home. But we got those bullet-ridden H-34s that they had there for 13 months. So we had to, and we patched them up best we could, and we made do with everything. We had excellent mechanics, good crew chiefs, and our CO was absolutely an unbelievably remarkable man.
Larry, you arrive in Da Nang, and you're welcome as bullet-ridden helicopters.
Yeah, and we had missions already scheduled for the next day.
What?
And
what were your first thoughts about all this?
well, I said, well, how are we going to get there? And then finally they came out and they had given us old French maps. When the French were over there, they had pretty good maps. We couldn't read any of the names hardly at all, or they had Vietnamese names and French names, but the coordinates were accurate, and so they would give us the coordinates where we needed to support the ground troops. And
Could you explain what you were doing in supporting the ground troops when you got over there? What was there any typical assignment, or was every day a little different?
every day was different. We did resupply. We took the mail out to the troops. There were some fire support bases that were up on top of the mountains around there, and we would take the 105 and 155 howitzer ammo up there to them. We'd take the food up there to them, the mail. We would fly medevacs, and every once in a while, probably a couple of times a week, we would fly what we referred to as inserts with the recon people. We would fly out a single bird and then fly around someplace and land at a couple of 3 different places. We knew the Viet Cong were watching us, and we'd get into an area, and they might get out on the first place we dropped in, or they might get out on the last one, or any of the other ones. So it was kind of a domino thing, not a domino, it was a shell game, so where we can put those guys out. And very often, they would be found quickly, and they would be calling for an emergency extract, and usually a couple of medevacs were associated with that because they got ambushed. So we'd go back out and go into the zone.
Medevacs.
We'd do medevacs as well.
Would you describe a medevac mission?
Yeah. One of the things that I noticed, and I didn't want to talk to anybody else because I thought I was going crazy. But if you're sitting up there, you know where the coordinates are, you know where the zone is, and you're trying to stay away from there for a while until you got the word from the guys on the ground that the medevac is ready to be picked up, and or they've quit lobbing mortars into the landing zone, and you're sitting up there all this time, and the adrenaline is just pumping.
Yeah.
And about that time, just before they call you in, everything to me, there was no technicolor at all. It was all black and white. Everything, I didn't see shades of grays and blacks, but we'd fly in the mission and get the guys. Sometimes they would just quit shooting just to know that we're not going in there if the bad guys are shooting. So the bad guys would just quit, and then so we would go in, and about the time we were in a flare to land in the pad, then they'd open up again. And you were already there, so you just stayed there until they got everybody loaded up, and you could hear them going through your helicopter and
Sitting duck.
Sitting duck.
You're totally vulnerable.
Yeah.
Totally vulnerable.
Yeah.
So did you have a medic on board, or the medic was on the ground?
The medic was on the ground.
On the ground.
But if we had, we might be called away from another mission to do a medevac. But we always had a medic if we were assigned, as that was our only duty for the day at the squadron out of Da Nang or Marble Mountain, one of the bases that we were. We would have a medic with us then. But if sometimes the group, whatever size the ground group was, sometimes they had 3 or 4 medics with them. But if it was really serious stuff, one of them may jump on board with the people that we were carrying back to the medical base.
Yeah, Larry, this is a hard question to ask, but how many casualties do you recall in a mission? How many were you picking up?
Well, there were times when we would have taken maybe a couple of squadrons got together and to take a regiment of Marines in, and we did this in Operation Starlight, which was the first big battle that happened in Vietnam. It was just south of Chu Lai.
And it was called Starlight?
Starlight.
Mm-hmm.
And there were guys, every helicopter, we had 24 birds in our helicopter squadron. There was another squadron that was with us. I think every one of those birds flew at least 2 or 3 medevacs that day after we got everybody inserted. And sometimes they would load up 4 or 5 guys in you, and they would just slide them in. And it wore on you a little bit. I remember one time we went in, and we had been in 3 or 4 times, and the pilots, the aircraft commander on a helicopter sits in the right seat instead of the left seat like the airline captains do, because the cargo door is right there. You can see what's coming and going. And they were dragging these guys over, and some of them, there was 4 or 5 feet of intestines hanging out of them and blood just coming out of them, and they'd throw them into the thing. There was no stretchers, no gurney, nothing like that, because they just wanted to get them in there and get them out to care. And we took off one time. This is just vivid in my mind. We got out. We had about 4 guys laying on the belly, in the belly of that thing, and we got airborne and got leveled out. And the crew chief called me and he said, "Lieutenant," he said, "can you do a hard right turn and then put it into unbalanced flight?" And I said, "Yeah, what's the problem?" He says, "We got 2 inches of blood in the bottom of this." And so we were able to angle the helicopter to get all that out of there.
What just amazes me is keeping your cool under pressure. And there is nobody ever quite prepared for anything like that.
No, but you know, the training that we had from the day I joined the Marine Corps all the way up there prepped you for that. And usually at the time, that never really bothered me. It was later when I say, you know, could have I done something, could have I gotten there quicker? Could we put more people on, or could we have done this or that? And what was really in the medevac, this is the last story on the medevac, we would be out flying, I don't know if it was night or day, whatever, and you're sitting there waiting for the zone to get clear, and meanwhile, like I said, your adrenaline is just pumping up, and all these other things are happening, and you're so ready to go, and you got to get in there. And we're looking at the golden hour, they call it. If you could get them back to a med base, they had a 90% chance of surviving. Well, and then you're all set to go, and you can hear the Fox mic click on, and the guy will say, "You can return to base. The medevac is now a routine medevac," which meant that he had passed away. So here you are. You got these emotions working against each other. You got all this adrenaline, you got this sorrow thing going on, and you got this thing, why couldn't I have gotten there quicker?
It's probably still, at times, still fresh in your mind today. Those kinds of things you don't you rethink
some of that stuff. Sure. But I've been handling it pretty well. So.
And on a happier note, when you took the mail out to the troops.
Oh my God.
Can you share?
Oh yeah, some of these guys. Well, even us, and we were at a base. We had running water. We had tents, and these guys were living in foxholes, and they were they might get some mail once a week, or maybe not even that if the weather was bad. But I had so many of those people tell me, and I experienced myself, that mail was more important than food. And they lived for that, I tell you.
And you were kind of like the Santa Claus delivering the mail.
Yeah, and we would take the chaplain up to every outpost on Sundays, or whatever happened to be the religious persuasion.
And speaking of the religion, did that affect you at all during your time over there, or others, or you personally?
No, it didn't. It was just the chaplains that we had over there. They were absolutely tremendous, and they did things. They helped entertain the troops in the officers' club or the enlisted mess or stuff like that. And matter of fact, the chapel that they had at Marble Mountain sat right on the beach, on China Beach, on the south of the China Sea there. And the chaplain made a big sign that hung out there, and he actually built a facade of a face of a chapel with a thing and a bell tower on it.
Stained glass.
Yeah, and the sign said Eternal Life Insurance Company. That was the sign that he had on the chapel.
Levity and brevity.
Absolutely.
Gravity and brevity.
Yeah.
Levity and gravity.
Yeah, it was good.
Balancing it out, a little comic relief.
Yeah, but the chaplains were all and I got to visit with them a lot. They all could do, whether a Protestant chaplain, they could do last rites for the Catholics. They could do the services whatever it was for the Jewish faith. So they were a combination of everything, and they were just a comfort to everybody.
Of course. Did you ever have an opportunity, those that you brought back to base camp, were there any opportunities to visit with them, like in the hospital, the surgical unit, or anything like that?
No, never. We were.
Busy.
A lot of the medevacs, depending on the severity of the burns and those type of things, we took directly to the hospital ship. We had the USS Repose and the USS Sanctuary that followed the action up and down the coast. They were out of gunfire range.
So you flew the patients out?
We'd fly them out there, yeah.
Oh,
because
that's wonderful.
Especially the ones that had burns or real severe injuries, trying to maintain a sanitary place in a jungle environment, it was really tough, and they would go out and take them out there. And it was so neat to go out there because the nurses would come out and they would bring out apples that had been in the refrigerator and give one to the crew chief and the medic and both the pilots. And
like a steak dinner.
It was, oh gosh, it was wonderful. Yeah.
Did you ever get any ice cream?
Every once in a while, the mess hall would come up with some ice cream, and it was homemade stuff. But powdered milk and powdered eggs and sea rations were pretty much the staple of the day.
Were you flying just about every day?
Just about every day.
Mm-hmm. I have to ask you, did you ever crash or?
I did a couple of. I guess I probably would have if I was in an aircraft. I mean, in an airplane. Mm-hmm. But we were able to auto rotate to a safe landing with the helicopter, and I had the oil cooler shot out the engine, and it overheated, and so it started dying. So we just we got to the beach as close as we could, and then we would just shoot an auto rotation from whatever altitude we were, and do
I know what auto rotate is, but for the record, if you want to describe what an auto rotate is.
Well, when the engine quits, and it's of course is turning the rotor system through that big transmission, and as soon as the first hint you get that something's wrong, you need to unload the pitch on those rotor blades, because if you don't, they'll start slowing down and you'll turn into a brick. But you get the collective, which controls the pitch and the blades, all the way to the bottom.
There you go.
All the way to the bottom till you hit about 40 feet, and you can still fly that thing while the engines are not going. And about 40 feet, if you can find a place to put it down, you do a flare, and then about 40 feet, and then drop it right straight down to. You want to land with zero airspeed, and that's one of the capabilities of crashing a helicopter. Is if you can do it with zero forward airspeed, you're in good shape. We did that.
What's the landing like?
Usually it's pretty soft. We practiced them. We practiced them all the time.
Oh, that had to be.
Yeah.
I had that done one time, and it's quite a sensation.
Oh, yes.
Just get that engine restarted, please.
Yeah.
Anyway, so you were out flying every day. Could you describe your living circumstances?
When the first first tour we were over there, they were just regular tents, and flapping in the breeze and all that kind of stuff. And the grounds were all muddy, and we used pallets to make sidewalks out of and all that stuff. But the second tour we were over there, we had hardback tents. They were elevated about 3 feet. They had wooden floors, and the hardbacks went up about to the top of where the tent started pitching up. And they were big enough that we could. There were usually about 6 guys in each one of those.
Mm-hmm. And as far as water, was it pretty primitive the first time around, as far as cold showers or keeping clean and all that?
It was. Mm-hmm. But the showers were. We were glad to get the showers when we got there, because aboard ship we were taking saltwater showers. Ooh. And that's not fun at all. That's you feel pretty sticky by the time you get out of there. But usually they had a big tank, and the tanks were painted black so that through the sunlight, after they'd been in that water had been in those huge tanks for a couple of days, it was pretty warm coming out, and it was pretty good. But
was it mess hall food or sea rations? Or
we would usually have at least, the first tour, about every other meal was a sea ration meal. They usually tried to serve breakfast, and then they had a dinner. But you might have been flying from 4 on and miss it, and then come back and then fly another one in the afternoon. So we always had plenty of sea rations around. But most of the food was pretty generic. It was powdered milk and powdered eggs, but every once in a while they would get one of the cooks would trade something to either the Seabees or the Air Force people and get a pallet of steaks or something like that, and it was feed time then.
Well, what was the countryside like? How would you describe where you were in Vietnam?
It was beautiful, really beautiful. And we were our bases were usually in the lowlands where the helicopters were, and we were right next to the coast. I was at Quang Tri. I was at Da Nang, Marble Mountain, Phu Bai, which is up north, and Quang Tri, and they were all in the lowlands area. But most of our missions were back into the hinterland, into the right along the edges where the foothills, where a lot of the rice paddies were, and those kinds of things. But a lot of wildlife. Saw some
like water buffalo.
There are elephants, water buffaloes, tigers. You can see those every once in a while. And what was one of the other things that we saw up there? Peacocks. You'd see a peacock every once in a while up there, and you'd surprise them. But it was that triple canopy stuff was just absolutely beautiful.
You know, if it weren't the war, it would probably be a thrilling place to fly a helicopter.
Oh, yes.
Low level,
yeah.
Seeing all of that countryside, but that, unfortunately,
yeah.
your assignment.
I've had friends that I was with that have been back since that date, and they said that whole area is built up with high-rise hotels and just unbelievable modern facilities. Yep, that's right.
The resorts.
Yeah.
Who would have thought?
Yeah.
Beautiful beaches.
Boy, they were.
But so your tour, the first time around, was 12, 13 months?
It was 13 months from May until June of the following year.
And flying almost every day.
Mm-hmm.
It's remarkable. Not a scratch at the end of 13 months.
No.
It's amazing.
No, it was. It was amazing. And not to say that I didn't get my helicopter shot up once in a while. And we had, some of the times we'd get back to the med, and the guys that were in there being shot the first time were shot again inside the helicopter up through the belly or something like that. And it's,
it is remarkable. Well, At the end of that first tour, the last 30 days, well, are you having communication home then? I mean, much communication back and forth?
It was just that tour. I didn't have any voice communications at all with my wife, and I had a son then too, or my folks. But it was all done with letters.
How old was your son at the time?
He was born in November of '64. And I left in May of '65, so he was about 6 months.
Yeah, very young.
Yeah.
Well, that's,
But he never learned anything from me because he wound up in the Marine Corps himself later.
Something glad.
Yeah, I guess so.
I'm sure he loved what you did in your stories. But so these last 30 days, when you're just about ready to go home, what were you doing the last month over in the first tour? Were you still flying?
Still flying. We flew. There were two of us that left on the same day, and we both flew the day before on missions. And then we flew. They flew us from we got on a truck, and they took us to Da Nang, where we got on a C-130. We were the only two from that squadron, and we went to Okinawa, and then they put us on one of those freedom flights that used to fly in there, and then flew us back to LAX. And they told us up there, throw away your uniforms. Don't wear your uniforms.
You literally were told to do that.
Yeah, don't do it because you're going to get nothing but hell when you get back. Well.
Yeah, would you describe that? Yeah.
Jack Mills was with me, and I was a lieutenant by then, and he was a captain. And we said, baloney, we're not going to do that. We're going to wear them. And we did. We wore them through L.A. and in the airport. In the airport.
And anything happened?
Oh, yeah. You just ignored them.
I don't know what happened.
Oh, they were typical thing. They'd call you, baby killers and those kinds of things. And how can you do what you do? We just ignored them. We just like a plow horse with blinders on, I guess, marching through there.
Each time I hear this story, it's just surreal to me that this really, really happened in our country.
Yeah.
And I know it did.
Yeah, and I flew from there up to Lewiston, Idaho. My folks lived 68 miles up the river from Lewiston, a town called Kamiah. I got there late that night, and I went into the hotel down in Lewiston.
In uniform?
I still had my uniform on. I couldn't buy a drink. I couldn't buy my own dinner.
Different. Yeah, much different.
Different people, different times.
You bet.
And then my mom and dad came down and picked me up the next morning, so it was good.
Did they have any idea what you had done that year, your family?
Not really. I had sent them a couple of clippings out of the Stars and Stripes about that Operation Starlight because they had pictures of our helicopter in the landing zones and some narrative there. And I sent them a copy of that a couple of times for those things.
I cannot imagine what the family would go through in that year's time, knowing specifically what you were doing over there. But getting back just the day before you left to go home, you were still flying the helicopter. Was that by choice?
No, it wasn't. It was because of the mission load we had. We needed everybody but there, and they put us on as early as they could in the day, so we could come back and get everything packed up. So it was.
Wow. You had to be a little jittery the day before going home.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
Short time, understandably.
Yeah, you were. The second tour, because of that, the perception of flying right up till the day you leave. I think they tried to give us the last week off. Big deal, but it wasn't. It was good.
Getting back to a little bit lighter note, on your first tour, did you ever see any entertainment like Bob Hope or a USO? Any of those come through?
We saw a couple of them. gosh, what was the gal's name? She was a comedian, Martha Ray.
Martha.
She was over there, and we got to fly her from Marble Mountain after she did a show there up to Fubai, which was about 65 miles north for another show. And then we left her there, and the squadron up there took care of her from there. But she was a hoot. She was so friendly, and so. But she was a Navy nurse at one time.
You know, this is just off the record here, but I shared a 3-holer with her in UK.
Oh, brother. Oh, my gosh.
That's my worst story. Anyway, getting back to you, and okay, we got through this first tour of duty, and you went to Okinawa, on to LA, back to home, but you're still in the Marine Corps.
Yes.
On leave. Okay, now what?
I flew to, there was a great big Air Force operation going on at that time called Reforger 1. It was all of the transports were flying, the military transports were flying to Europe and back from the East Coast. So there was no military flight for me to get. And the airline strike was on at that same time. So, and my wife had met me at my mom and dad's place. And the only way we could go back, and she was living with her folks in just right outside of Pensacola. We took a train from Boise, Idaho to Chicago, changed trains, and went all the way down to Dothan, Alabama, and then her folks picked us up there. That was in 1966. Then we stayed there about a week. My new duty station was in New River, North Carolina at Camp Lejeune area. When we drove on board base, the gate guard looked at my ID card and handed me a note from the Red Cross. And my dad had throat cancer and lung cancer, and he was in really bad shape. And so they said, you need to get back there. Reforger was still going on, and the airline strike was still going on. So I took a Trailways bus from Jacksonville, North Carolina to Boise. And my brother and a friend of mine picked me up in a private airplane at Boise. And I missed, my dad passed away about 2 days before I got there. And then when I came home, I came all the way back that same route in a Greyhound. And meanwhile, my wife fortunately we found a place to stay in a day and a half while I was there before I left. And I said, go down and get what furniture you want, and the movers, there's a number for what goods we have, will be there. I got back, she had the house all set up and the whole thing.
What a trooper.
Yeah.
What a trooper, my goodness. Just one thing, yeah. Nice boy. Well, then you're back in North Carolina.
North Carolina.
Okay, and that's your new duty station.
Duty station.
And doing.
I was flying H-34s again, and I was one of the. They really liked having people come back that had been to Vietnam because those folks had not been to Vietnam yet. So we trained them on all different kinds of tactics. High-angle approaches and spiral approaches, low-level approaches, and all this other stuff that saved our butts from time to time over there. And then I started flying back there with them in August. In November, they put me on an aircraft carrier and sent me to the Caribbean for 5 months on a Caribbean cruise on the USS Guam.
Was that good?
It was too close from the time I had been gone. Then they put me out and shipped me down there again. Away from home again for all 5 months. That was over Christmas, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and we got back in, I think it was in April.
And your son was over a year older at that time, and wow, the families, they really are. They're in the background.
Yeah. But you know, the Marine wives, boy, they were tight knit. I mean, the CO's wife She was the CO of the girls. I mean, she made sure that they had everything they needed. That she did entertaining. She had dinners, and they did all kinds of things together. And the wives had there was a phone phone tree that if one of the guys was in Vietnam, got injured or killed. These girls were called, and then they would all gang up and go over to that wife's place.
Sisterhood.
And this one, my wife was with, she was teamed up with the CO's wife, and they got word that you need to get together and get your things together, and there'll be a car come by and pick you up. And we went right back to the CO's house. He had gotten shot. And he had gotten shot in the back of the head, and he was blind, but he lived for about another 20 years. And she kept saying, what are we doing here for? And Nancy, my wife, didn't know, but she just had to comfort her the best they could, and the chaplain was there and everything. So
just the civilian world would never comprehend really that sisterhood and the military family. Really a unique. Very unique. Yeah. My wife now, which is a different woman, she's got a sticker on the side of her car. It says, if you think being a Marine is tough, you ought to be a Marine wife. There's some
truth in that.
Some truth to that. But you're out there doing your part in the service too. So you're in the Caribbean, and I want to ask you about training those men that had not been to Vietnam yet. Did they talk to you a lot? Wanted to get answers? Want to hear your stories?
Some of them did. Some of them they just wanted to pick your brain. And then there were some, and I don't want to be disparaging to Annapolis or not, but some of the officers that were there that were Annapolis graduates they took the Marine option at the boat school. They were a little bit on the arrogant side, and they didn't want you telling them anything. They had the solutions to almost everything. And it was a little, after a while you just throw up your hands.
Yeah, I know. Well, then you're back then at New River, and did you volunteer then the second go-around for Vietnam?
Well, I volunteered by staying in the Marine Corps. I could have gotten out if I wanted to, but I stayed in. And one of the reasons that I stayed in is that they offered me the opportunity to transition from the H-34 helicopter to the big Sikorsky CH-53.
The heavy, big ones.
The big ones, yeah. And I did that, and then...
so that was a guaranteed return.
Absolutely, yeah. So
and you knew that.
I knew that. Yeah.
So what year you're back over? 69. You're back over in Vietnam again.
I went over in December of 1968 and stayed all of '69.
So let's see. You had gotten beyond the Tet season. That was early.
I missed Tet, and I missed Quezon.
Ooh. Two big ones.
So,
did you see any difference in the war at the time you went back over?
Oh yeah,
happening?
Yeah. When I left the first time, we were winning, and we weren't when we were over there.
And we were not winning the second time because
I found out very quickly when I went back there. I thought I was going to be flying the H-53s, but I had a buddy who was a colonel in the wing administration office that directed where all the new guys went to. So I went to VMO 6 in.
A VMO
would be a V is a fixed wing, M a Marine, and the O is observation. But they had bird dogs, which is Cessna bird dogs, and they had OV-10s, which were a twin-engine jet turbine airplane that we used to do tactical air control airborne with. We would go out in the bird dog, and we never got above 500 feet most often, not. We just stayed really low. But sometimes it was. If you got real thick jungle, and you're moving through these things real quick, they can't get a good beat on you. But if you were up 4,000 feet, they had a longer time to track you, and they could get you with a 50.
And you were observing what the enemy was.
We were finding targets is what we were doing. And then if we found a target, we would call the Direct Air Support Center and tell them what you need. I said, I need a couple of flights of either F4s, A4s, A6s, whatever you've got, and I need napalm, I need 250-pound low drag bombs or high drag bombs or 500-pound things. Bring me what you got, and then they would check in, they would fly in. I would be staying close to where the target was.
You were watching all this.
I was watching it, but once I identified them exactly where they were, I'd move off and get on the other side of the ridgeline a little bit. Our top of our wings on our bird dog were painted white, because if you're against that canopy down there, the guys that are coming in at 10,000 feet with all the bombs, they can pick you out. And then you would, and I would do a maneuver, and I'd say, okay, have you got me in sight? They said, yes. I said, okay, what kind of a turn am I in? You're in a left-hand turn, you're in a right-hand turn. Because sometimes the bad guys could get on the same frequencies and talk. So we'd get them, I'd give them, after they got me identified, I'd give them the target brief, the type of target, the elevation of the target, any threats in the area, and what kind of bombs I wanted first. And then I would put a white phosphorus. I'd get back over the target, put a white phosphorus in there, a big plume of white smoke, and then I would give them, okay, there's the target, do you have the target? They do. And then I said, okay, as soon as you get on your heading and get your wings level, I'll clear you in hot. And so I would do that, and they'd clear them out, and they would put them in there, and there might be 2 airplanes, there might be 4 airplanes, all in a big circular pattern running that stuff. It was.
Well, getting back to what you said, Larry, is very interesting. The second time around, we were not winning the war. This is what you said.
Okay. Perfect example is that. We went up on, and there was a big operation called, what was it? Anyway, I was doing dawn patrol, and I was out there at about 5:30. Sun was just popping over, and I went down it was out next to the Laos and the South Vietnamese border, and the Ho Chi Minh Trail came down through there. And I came around, and I caught a glimpse of movement through the canopy, and I got on the other side a little bit, tried to stay away from them, and there must have been 5 miles of elephants, water buffalo, armored carriers, men walking with 2 or 3 rockets on their back, and they're going on, and it was really. So I got out of sight again, got on, called DASC, said, okay, we've got a huge target up here, send me everything you have. Get stuff from the ships. I don't care if it's Army or, no, Army didn't have the attack aircraft over there, the Air Force or whatever. Get them all. We can use as much as we can over here. That was like at 5:45. We had 3.5 hours of fuel on that bird, and I got to where I was about 15 minutes away from running out of fuel. And I called him and I said, where is this stuff? Where I'd been checking with him. Well, it's been taken down to Mac V, which was military Saigon thing down there. They're going to make the decision down there. Well, a buddy in an OV-10 came out and relieved me. I went back and refueled, waited for about an hour and a half, and then went back to relieve him. Nothing had happened by then. And by 11:30, they said, okay, we got clearance. And I said, it's no use. Send everybody home. They're no longer here. They're gone. They're dispersed. And so I got back, and I got on the phone and talked to DASC, and I said, what happened? Well, the decision went to Saigon, and then it disappeared somewhere in Washington, D.C. And I said, well,
wow.
Target lost.
Wow.
And that happened more and more and more frequently. The war was not being run by the generals in Vietnam. It was being run by probably some of the generals in the Pentagon, or perhaps more on the political side than anything else.
You know, if you don't mind this being on the record, I would like to know why they changed their mind about wanting to win the war.
Oh, man, if I could tell you, I'd written a book a long time ago. I just don't know. I think a lot of it was the pressure they were getting from the Doves. And why are you doing this so far away from home? I think that had something to do with it.
Well, so these were your daily assignments then, until 13 months of this then.
Well, I did about not quite 6 months of that. Then we gave the bird dogs to the Korean Air Force in Da Nang, because the Marine Corps were just getting more and more of their OV-10s, which were a better airplane for that mission. So they sent me back down to Da Nang, or Marble Mountain, to fly what I went over there to fly begin with in the H-53s.
Okay.
So I did that and finished up the tour there.
Sure. And so it was another 13-month tour. Is that what you said?
Yeah, I did 5 months, then I did 7. It was totally.
Well, I just can't imagine how demoralized you must have been. You're putting your life on the line every day and being very demoralized and maybe feeling some futility. But I'm editing this conversation, so we'll move forward.
Oh, sure.
But getting to the end of that, then you're ready to go back home. Not a scratch.
Not a scratch.
That is absolutely amazing.
But there's one thing that I did that I'm really glad I was able to do. We were over there, it was a month or so before I was going to ship back home. We were coming back from a resupply mission in an H-53, and I got a call from the Direct Air Support Center and said, gave me my call sign, "What's your fuel state?" And I said, "Well, I got about almost an hour worth of fuel." He said, "Good. I want you to go to these coordinates," which is a little town south of Da Nang called An Hoa. And I said, "What's the deal?" And he said, "Well, that village is being overrun by the NVA. And we've got a whole bunch of refugees that we've got them in a field, and can you go pick whatever you can out of there?" So we got there real quick, and we stayed away from where all the action was going on behind them, probably about a mile or mile and a half. And all these people were gathered in this big field. So we landed down there, and I said, "Okay, this is going to be fun, guys." I was talking to the first mechanic and the crew chief. I said, "As soon as we get down there, don't open the cabin doors. We're going to lower the ramp in the back. And then as they come on board, get them as far forward as you can, as fast as you can." And they kept coming and kept coming and kept coming. Scrambling in there, climbing over each other, wanting to get the hell out of there. And finally, I told the crew chief, I said, "Where?" And he was on the back with the microphone. He had a long line, and he had the ramp control back there with him. And I said, "How are we? Are you about full?" And he says, "Oh, God, we're packed right now." I said, "How many have we got?" And he says, "I don't know, Captain." He said, I don't know. And I said, "Well, okay, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to start taxiing, and we're going to leave the ramp down. And what we're going to do, these guys are going to continue to run and want to jump into this thing. I'm going to start taxiing till they can't keep up with us. And once that happens, I want you to raise the ramp. And then we're going to be going to Da Nang. We're going to drop them off at MacV over there." And I asked the crew chief, I said, "Well, how many do we have?" He said, "I stopped." That's a normal, it carried 38 fully equipped Marines. He said, "I stopped at 100.
Well, you were able to lift off.
And he said, "I didn't even count the babies." And we were able to lift off and get out of there. That helicopter had 2 jet turbines in it that each one of them generated 4,400 shaft horsepower. So we had pretty good power. But we were able to get out of there. I could tell we had a heavy load, but we got them in and dumped them off. And their smiles when they got off that thing were just amazing.
What a victory flight for them.
Yeah.
Flight to freedom. Wow,
Yeah.
great story. Oh, my. Well, you did a lot of different things to serve a lot of different types of people over there, Larry, in a lot of ways, including back home.
Yeah.
So getting back home, was that getting toward the end of your, or did you serve a little bit longer in the Marines than when you
I went there as soon as I knew by the time I left the Bird Dogs and got into the 53s that I was going to HMX. Marine Helicopter Squadron 1.
Share how that happened and explain HMX.
HMX is Marine Helicopter Squadron 1. The H is a helicopter, M is Marine, and the X is experimental. It was the first helicopter squadron in the Marine Corps.
Really?
And they formed it in 1947 to prove a new way of getting troops into battle off of ships. And that's what they did. And the X was experimental because they were the first squadron. When they formed it, they had 12 enlisted guys and 2 pilots. And none of them, they didn't have any helicopters. None of them in that had ever been in a helicopter.
Oh, my goodness.
But anyway, it's still the experimental squadron for the Marine Corps. Mm-hmm.
And were you selected? Did you have to apply, or were you selected, or how'd that work?
One of the guys that was my operations officer when I was in Vietnam the first time, he went there, and he became the operations officer of the squadron, and you could only get there by recommendation. And he recommended me, and I got a note asking me if I wanted to do this, and I said yes. And so they sent me the packet for all my clearance stuff. I got it all filled out and sent it back. And by the time I got there, by the time I checked in to the squadron, my clearance was already there.
Well deserved.
Yeah,
How
yeah.
exciting.
It got my hometown a little bit upset.
Because?
Well, they didn't know what I had done wrong this time. They said, Larry, what's going on? There's all these funny-looking guys in these slim suits with little skinny little ties, and they're asking all these embarrassing questions about you. Have you been thrown in jail? Did you have any money problems? What's his sexual preference? That was one of the questions that came up. So,
background checking.
Yeah, they were doing it.
I would think just because you had been in the Marine Corps for so long, that would have, but that you needed the top secret to do that.
Yeah.
And that was a little different category.
Yeah.
So you flew, flying colors on that. So they must have been wonderfully excited and proud of you. And did you go to Quantico for this?
I went to Quantico.
And how long was that training? And did you know who you were going to be serving at the time?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess you would have known.
Yeah, I knew, and of course Mel Kuykendall, the guy that basically invited me to come or recommended me to go, he had given me a lot of information, and so I was aware of the squadron before anyway. So
how many were there of you in the squadron?
We had 52 pilots in the squadron. Total squadron strength at that time was 350 people, including we had 2 different sides to the flight line. We had the White House side, and then we had the green side that supported the Marine Corps and did a lot of the experimental projects on new equipment. We were just starting to do experimental work on the night vision goggles at that time and some other types of stuff. But
you lived at Quantico?
I lived on the base, there.
Did you know any of the other pilots? Had you served with them before?
Yes, about 3 or 4 of them.
Yeah,
And as I was there for that 4-year period, I every once in a while a new one had come in that I had known before, and it was kind of like old home week sometimes. Yeah, it was good.
I mean, a very, very unique club.
Oh, man, yeah.
I'm curious, and I want to ask about your, we have a few more minutes. I do want to ask, do you still get together with some of these pilots?
Yes. A matter of fact, we belonged, there was a group, the Marine Corps has this is just Marine Corps wide now, helicopter pilots. They have an outfit called the Marine Corps Combat Helicopter Squadron Reunion. And they had every year they'll have a big one, usually in LA or Las Vegas or Orlando or Alexandria, Virginia, or someplace. And this first squadron I went overseas with in May of '65, every time we'd go to these things, we'd wind up in the corner someplace visiting with each other. We knew everybody's wives and do all this other stuff. And finally, one day, I forget where we were. We were at Reno. No, we were Reno. Said, why in the heck do we do this? We spend, it costs us $4,000 once we get down here, and all you get is a new T-shirt and a coffee cup, and then you go back, but we always spend the time together. Why don't we get together? So in 2007, we got just our squadron together, and we had the first one in Walla Walla.
Here?
Here, and they absolutely loved it. We've had one every 2 years since then. The next one was in San Antonio. The guy down there who was in the CIA, retired from the CIA, was in our first tour down there. He put the party together for us there. Then we went to, where was the next one? Oh, the next one was at Portsmouth, New Hampshire. We had a beautiful time up there. The guy that was there, a guy by the name of R.G. Adams, he was also in the CIA.
No relation.
He retired, no relation, and so that's a beautiful town. I love Portsmouth. It was great. And then the next one we had, which was last year in November, over the Marine Corps birthday, on November the 10th, was at Kailua Kona on the Big Island, and there were two buddies over there that lived on that island that helped put that party together.
Wow.
Next year, they want to come back to Walla Walla. I mean, the next 2 years. They do. But there's a guy that lives in Portland area. He wants to come. He wants to maybe put it together. I said, well, we can team up if you want to. It's close enough we can do that. But we've started off with about 28 guys that came, and some enlisted guys that came, crew chiefs and mechanics. And this last time in Hawaii, we were down to, I think there were 12 guys, and some of them couldn't come because of, ailments, or they had other things going, and we'd lost 5 or 6 by then anyway. So,
but still, what?
We have a ball. We just have a great time.
Non-stop stories.
And you talk about stories growing over years. First liar doesn't have a chance,
Well, I would like to, in a wrap-up, I would like to ask you, you are a Marine when you're flying the President.
Yes.
You are Marines. Could you just share some really, I know there has to be a million stories, but just a highlight of, it was President Nixon, any specific or particular story you'd like to share?
Oh, there's a couple. We did a lot of flying, of course, in and out of Andrews, Air Force One, Marine One, Air Force One, Marine. I always told the Air Force guys, we fly the President twice as many times as you do. They said, what do you mean? I said, well, we take him to you, and then we pick him up, bring him back. The whole thing. They said, oh, okay, that's faulty math, but you can get away with it. But we did a lot of Camp David work. We did Chicago during the election for his second term, which was wild. Secret Service were on that place like white on rice. They were all over the place. But we flew to Bahamas, Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, the Azores, Bermuda, all kinds of those places. And I, being the White House liaison officer, I did all the advanced work on that. I did a really fun one. They called me at my office in Quantico one day from the military assistant to the president. His office called me and said, can you be at Andrews in 15 minutes? And I said, maybe. And I said, winter bag or summer bag? Because I had to keep both bags in my locker in the squadron. And he said, winter bag. So I called the flight line. I said, get a Huey turned up for me. I'll be out there. I don't need a co-pilot. Just send I'm going to leave it at Andrews, and you can bring a pilot up, and they will pick it up and get that crew chief back home. So I got up there, got on it was one of the old Air Force Ones that wasn't being used, wasn't on a mission at that time. We got on there. There's the White House people, the WACA people, the Secret Service were there, Air Force One guys, of course, Army transportation guys were there, and a whole bunch of other strap hangers. So we were over. We didn't even know where we were going, And the pilot, Ralph Albatazzi, he was an Air Force One pilot at that time, but but did this because he wanted to be on the regular mission when we got done with our advance. And he said, "Oh, ladies and gentlemen, look out the left-hand side of the thing. That's Newfoundland." Okay. And then he said, "Oh, you probably want to know where you're going, don't you?" So we wound up in Iceland, and we stayed there did our advanced stuff for about 3 days, and then flew back. And then I had to fly back up there because they weren't going to take a helicopter, but they needed a helicopter to extract the president out of a bad situation to be able to follow the motorcade, because he was landing at Keflavik and they were motorcading into Reykjavik, which is the capital of Iceland.
Were they having a meeting?
He was meeting Pompidou from France.
And Reagan, I believe, met at the same place years later.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That same location.
So we weren't going to take a helicopter up there. So what our squadron commander did, he got a hold of the Commandant of the Marine Corps. The Commandant of the Marine Corps got a hold of the Chief Staff of the Air Force, and got me authorized to go up there and get trained on one of their Jolly Green Giant helicopters, because if you're going to have the president, you have to have a presidential aircraft commander signed for that airplane. So it took about 3 days to get all that paperwork done, and so I went up there, and the CO of the rescue squadron up there was an Air Force lieutenant colonel. I was a major then. Nicest guy in the world. And he said, "No problem, we'll go do it." I spent about 4 hours out flying around with him. We saw places in Iceland that most people don't ever get to see. And
And all the stuff that goes on behind the scenes
my gosh.
we would never know.
Yeah.
And what another unique, elite privilege.
Yeah.
You've seen the most blissful and the worst. And what a complete life. Larry, if you had to do anything over again, anything different, anything to add that I could be here another hour.
No, I don't have any regrets at all. My biggest regret is the split up of our first marriage, and that happened while I was in Daytona, because I had been on the road 200 days a year for 4 years, and it was crazy. But a real interesting story. My buddy and I took Ehrlichman and Haldeman, Nixon's staff guys. Picked them up at the Pentagon when things were starting to get heated up there during Watergate, and we picked them up at the Pentagon and flew them up to Camp David the day that Nixon fired them. And it was a real quiet trip back home to the Pentagon.
Okay. I do have to, the obvious question, did you ever talk to President Nixon?
Briefly. One of the things that we learned, two things they drilled into us there, was flying the helicopter. Safety, comfort, and speed, in that order. We would sacrifice safety for none of the other two. The other one was only speak if spoken to. Do not initiate a conversation. You can answer a conversation if you ask a question, but do it in the briefest manner. Agnew came up to me one time. I picked him up at the Pentagon, and we were flying over to the eastern shore of Maryland in Marine 2, which is the same one, but got a different plaque on the side. And he came up like he always did. "You guys want some coffee? Okay, everything's fine." He was just a glad hander. He was good. Patted me on the shoulder, and he says, "How's it going today?" I said, "Not bad, sir. How about yourself?" He said, "Man, they're really after my ass." And about 2 weeks later, when he resigned, that was crazy.
He had a premonition.
But one of the funniest ones was, you probably remember Sam Donaldson.
Sure.
He was kind of an arrogant guy.
He'd go up and knock on the White House window.
I know.
Almost.
Well, we were waiting. Colonel Perriman, I was his co-pilot. We were taking Nixon someplace, and he was supposed to be part of the White House. The press corps that could go on the helicopter with. Well, the president was usually the last guy on before we brought the door up, and the Marine Guard got in. We were all ready to go, and we got the door shut up, and here comes Sam running out of the south portico of the White House, down the lawn, and the colonel called the Secret Service guy that sits in the foyer right behind our cabin. He says, "What do we do now?" And he says, "Let's get out of here." So the door came up, and he said, "Just get out of here." And Colonel pulled the power in on that thing and blew Sam's toupee off into the shrub line across the yard. And Nixon just, he said, "This guy's going to bust a gut out here. He's just, our president is laughing so hard I haven't seen it done that before." He chased his wig all the way into the tree line. And that was kind of humorous. So.
By the way, how was President Nixon's salute?
Better than the one we have now.
Oh.
Yeah, he was good. The other guy that I loved I did a lot of stuff with and for and flew him around was Alexander Haig.
Yeah.
He was a gentleman.
Yeah.
He was a nice guy, smart. He did so many things to take care of our crew. If we were out, we were at Disney World, Disneyland one time, the president was there doing something. We were going to have to wait for about 4 hours, and he came out with about 5 people and loads of sandwiches and drinks and stuff for us. And he came back out himself a couple of times to check on us to make sure we were doing fine. He just took care of the troops.
Right. Wow. And we could spend another hour. So you got into civilian life and ended up here in Walla Walla as the airport manager?
Yeah. Well, from there I went to HMX. I went to college in Daytona. Then I went to Okinawa for another 12 months. Came back, went to Command and Staff College at Quantico. Then I was sent to the Air Force base at Hickam, Hawaii, on the Commander-in-Chief Pacific's Airborne Command Post. This was during the Cold War, and we dealt strictly with the nuclear codes and the weapons, and we could talk to the silos and the submarines and the B-52s, and we could retarget them. And I was not common for a Marine. I was just, on my battle staff I was the strategic intelligence officer for that battle staff, and we had a secret that was a top secret PSYOP, SI, ESI, TK, Gamma, about any kind of thing information you wanted to have. I had access to it, and I did that for 2 years. Second, still in Hawaii, I got promoted to lieutenant colonel. My orders were to be the fleet marine officer for U.S. 3rd Fleet on Ford Island in Hawaii. And my office was on the 3rd floor of this building. You could still see the pockmarks from Pearl Harbor, and I could look out my window and look right down on top of the Arizona Memorial. Did that every day. It was a fantastic. Stayed there 3 years and retired in 1982 after 21 years.
When you went in to that Marine Corps recruiter that day, little did you know what lay ahead of you. What an amazing life.
Boy, you are so right.
Just,
so right.
And still doing.
Yeah.
Still moving.
Yeah. I got to talk to the graduating class at the NROTC at the University of Idaho one time. And I said, you never know when you're going to go. You don't, but just keep in mind that your future arrives a little bit each day. And you're never going to see what the big picture is, but it's pieced together as you go, and that's based on your decisions you make.
Great speech.
So it was fun.
Great. I hope they heard you.
Yeah.
Well, I wish we had more time, but
well, this has been great.
This
has been great. Oh, you're welcome.
So much for sharing your story and your service.
Well, thank you for what you're doing. This is really, really important. A lot of this stuff that we talked about here right now, I may have talked about it to my 2 boys off and on, whether they pieced it all out of it together as far as the career path that I took. This will do that for them.
That makes
Yeah.
that makes us happy.
It is really
We're
great.
delighted.
It's really great. And one of the things, I've got all those plaques from all the, I got 20 plaques of all the different squadrons. On the back of each one of those plaques, I wrote when I got there, what I did, and any awards that I may have gotten there. And then on the face of the plaque, I got the rank that I got there and the rank it was when I left, what kind of ribbons were associated with any of that stuff, and what I did. So
That's fantastic
So-
to document all of that, because that
So-
will complete the story. And I can only imagine how proud your family is of your service. And I'm without words that you went through 2 tours and not a scratch.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
doing what you did, because I know how dangerous you were.
Yeah,
You
there
said
was-
that a lot.
there was, of my buddies that I went over with on those 2 tours that were pilots, I think 22 of them didn't come back. And there was probably twice that many enlisted guys that I knew.
Larry,
So just lucky, I guess.
not your time. When you
Somebody's looking out after you.
when you were in Washington D.C., did you go down to the wall on occasion?
Yes, I did. Yeah, a couple of times since.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Great
yeah.
meaning to you.
And they've got a beautiful wall, a miniature wall down in Pensacola, just like that, with all of the same names and everything. And
I
so,
have a great Red Cross donor friend who is a volunteer at the Pensacola.
oh wow,
Museum.
wow,
Yeah.
yeah, good, good.
Well,
Helicopter pilot.